Good afternoon.
Good evening.
Welcome back to the Tipsy Casting Podcast. I'm Jen, and this is my co-host, Jess. Oh, what a week it's been. I feel like a lot's been happening in the industry. And honestly, what better way to address it than on a podcast? And so we can put it out there in our own words and clear the air and kind of put our perspective out there, because I feel like it's been pretty harsh coming at the casting directors this week. But first things first, what are you drinking today and how has your week been?
Well, I think the perfect opportunity to drink is based on how this week has been, or the last few weeks, I should say. Today I'm drinking a elderflower tonic with beefeater gin and a splash of pomegranate juice. A little bit refreshing today.
Oh, I like that. I like that. I have a lovely red Côte de Rhone wine.
Looks
So
delicious.
I do. I tend to love my wines.
I'm a big Malbec fan, so I dive right into the
Ooh,
reds as well.
love it. Love it. Love it. But I like yours because it's refreshing and it's like, it doesn't probably seem as, intense.
I actually picked it up for the first time in a version of this in Ireland, actually. It was when I think it was season 2 of Fleabag had just aired and gin and tonics had become real popular real fast.
Yeah.
And we actually I took my sister to Ireland with me, and in Dublin, we had elderflower tonic water with strawberry gin, the pink gin. And
Ooh,
that
my
was
sister
really
has that.
good. Yeah,
Mm.
that's a good mix. And then I was at Bevmo and they ran out of the Beefeater strawberry
Oh,
gin. And so I
no.
tried oh God, what is it called? It's like indigo gin. And I'd never tried
Oh,
that
yeah.
before, but it's like a tea, a tea infused gin and it's purple.
Yeah.
And so I tried that with the tonic water with the splash of pomegranate just for the sweetness. It's really
Mm-hmm.
good. Feels like a new drink
That
to
sounds
me.
good, honestly. It sounds
Yeah.
like a very good like spring drink or even summer.
Yeah, it's a very floral experience, I think.
I know. I'm soaking up my red wine because I really don't drink red outside of winter.
Mm.
And then so I'm like, I just consume probably too much. But
Well, 'tis the season, it feels like right now with everything that's
yeah.
going on in our industry and our community. And I think this is the perfect way to address
Yeah.
everything. And there's so many layers.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So I think if you're okay with it, I think let's start with like maybe the like bigger picture of like what's going on with casting, and then we can get into kind of how it affects the self-taping and kind of everything that's being said, because I think you and I are in agreement on the fact that casting as a whole is very divided right now and very in distress in terms of like what's actually happening between other casting directors. If you take out the outside influence of actors, and what's actually happening is that we have the casting community is quite small in comparison to some of the other departments on production. So um I guess maybe what would be helpful is if we explain like kind of how the casting system works. Do you think that would be
Yeah, I think that's
useful?
especially for people who have no clue what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how about I will kind of give the over my my kind of view on it and see how you feel about it, and
Yeah.
then feel free to interrupt me. But so pretty much we have the two generations of casting with some people in the middle. I don't want to, discard them, but we do have an older generation of casting, and then we have the younger group coming up, and a lot of us trained under them, did that kind of thing. And so within casting, there's kind of these different levels of casting director. We have the long-term casting director who's been around forever, kind of created what casting is, so they really feel a lot of ownership over it. And then I think we have the casting executive level at studios and networks. That seems to be a middle ground of some people who don't have as much experience in like independent casting, but have come up either in the studio system or have transitioned from independent to studio.
And
And
can be identified sort of as the decision makers over sort
yeah.
of the job um, delegation of who
Hmm.
gets hired on certain projects.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you have kind of us, I'll put both of us in that up and coming group of, and please correct me if I'm wrong on you, but I think prior to COVID, we were doing really well in the indie space and having like kind of more low budget things that
Yeah.
we were really cultivating great projects with directors and producers. And um, so ultimately, kind of, I think what's going on is that my personal opinion is that there's a huge trickle down effect happening right now, where because the studio and network execs are, you know, gatekeeping who they're allowing to hire on their TV shows and films. That they have decided that there's about 10 casting directors in LA and New York who deserve everything.
Yeah.
And
I think
go
there's,
ahead.
just to identify also, there's this grouping of like the internal structure, but I think there's another subsection of this is in what you're beginning to touch on is there's the high volume casting directors, and
Hmm.
there's also the casting directors that are not necessarily of the younger generation that you'd mentioned before, but they are the ones who have, because of the high volume situation, have been pigeonholed into only doing independent film. Not to
Hmm.
say that they don't love and want to continue to do it, but these are the only opportunities they're getting access to, and some of these are the younger generation and some of them are not.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And ultimately, what's going to happen is if you keep hiring the same 10 people to cast every single one of your shows on every one of your networks, one, they're all going to look the same. And two, you're taking away the next generation of casting because they will eventually either retire or leave us.
Yes.
And it's something that I think people don't talk about enough because there's such a weird sense of like if we say anything bad about somebody who we came up under or the fact that they won't support us in, furthering our careers, it looks like we're trashing them or, making derogatory comments when we're really just stating like we just want to work. Like we're not trying to take your jobs, we're not trying to take your connections. However, there's so much content and so much work out there. Why should one casting office, and I was told this recently that by an agent, that one casting office in particular had 23 projects going.
Wow.
And that is, I'm going to say the name because we can bleep it out if we want to, but it was Betty May who
Yeah.
started all this controversy, who there's no reason if you take the smallest fee possible on 23 films, you are making so much money. And
Hmm.
then, so there's no reason for her to have started this whole side business. Whereas, um, I think that there are some other people who, it could be something where, other people who are struggling for money or, jobs or health insurance. Because I think a lot of people forget too that our work and like our
Yeah.
union work is directly related to what if we're working. So if we're not working, we don't have health insurance. And if we're
Yeah.
not working, our associates aren't working. So they don't have health insurance. So I
Yeah.
think right now we stand in the middle of this precipice of like literally, I would say about half of casting is out of work, can't pay their bills, don't have health
Yeah.
insurance without paying massive Cobra or, covered California rates. And it's all because these high volume offices have so many projects. And when you have all the work going to 10 offices or, I'm just guesstimating, um, they're only going to see the same actors. And then you get actors very upset that they're not getting in because every general I've had with actors lately has been the same thing of either like, oh, I'm getting seen so much and I just feel like this year's off to a great start. And then the majority, I'd say probably
Yeah.
80%, is saying, I haven't been seen once. I can't get in. I don't know what to do. Help me. And it's like, I would love to help you, but I'm sadly a part of the group that is not, a high volume casting office. And so all the cute little indies I used to do and the, fun, you know, things that would allow me to bring in new people and try them out are no longer existent.
Yeah.
And so go ahead.
I also just think it's like to really spotlight, like, as there may be this outward or external perspective that if someone is doing a ton of independent films that they're like really well off and they're happy and all of those things, which may be the case, but in most cases those independents, again, to sort of spotlight the fact that, we only get our health insurance through union hours, those independent films cannot afford to offer us pension and health. So
Mm-hmm.
we usually don't get them there. So if somebody is predominantly an independent casting director, they are struggling to meet their hours every
Mm-hmm.
single qualifying period. So
Yeah.
I think that it's so important to show the back end of how we work, because most actors, especially in this environment right now, where it feels so contentious and so hostile, where, the casting community, especially when it's something that's so out of our control, are getting mudslinged at us at every
Mm-hmm.
possible angle, essentially. Like, we are in the same damn boats as the rest of the actors. It is
Mm-hmm.
hard. We are freelance creatures. We go from job to job. It is hard for us to get a job. It is like we can't even keep our own clients that we have like nurtured relationships for decades. And when they get their big break, the high volumes get pushed on them, and they feel like they can't rock the boat, so they just go with it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different conversation about, loyalty and all of those fun things. But these filmmakers,
Yeah.
and I can understand it, they feel like they're not in a position to ask for things. But the
Mm-hmm.
fact that we can't
So can I
even,
ask
yeah.
you, have you had a personal experience with this that
I
you wouldn't
had
mind
three
sharing?
movies last. I'm not going to state the names of the movies, but I had three
No, yeah.
movies last year that came out in a big way, that they were my director experiences. Like, they were. I had a short that was acquired at South by in 2020. The
Mm-hmm.
director got a big deal, or got an acquisition from Paramount, and that movie was everywhere. And I didn't even get a meeting on the movie.
Really?
Yeah, I had oh my God, I think it was like 2017, something like that. I had cast a staged reading at Outfest for a filmmaker,
Mm-hmm.
and they finally got their funding together, and
Mm-hmm.
it premiered at TIFF. Didn't
Mm.
I got a text from the director being like, "Sorry, it didn't work out," and that was
What?
pretty much it. And then I had another one that I cast this filmmaker's first film, and he had another one that was cast internally within the production company, which I totally understood. And then
Mm-hmm.
this third time, and I think, and it also released a tip. But I think, I'm super understanding of the fact that these things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One, that they shouldn't, that if you are hiring a filmmaker for the job that they did on a previous film, I am part of that experience. I am part of
Mm-hmm.
that journey. So if you are hiring them for what they've done, that is me as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I should not be shafted in the process, essentially.
Yeah.
And the other part is that it's just, how do we ever come up?
Mm-hmm.
How do we break through if there are casting directors, and this just happened a couple weeks ago, of, they're winning Artios awards for micro budget indies and low budget indies
Mm-hmm.
and studio features. We're
Yeah.
fighting these people on the top and the bottom now. So how are
Mm-hmm.
we supposed to survive?
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
this is the problem as casting directors. It's such an antiquated perspective of the gatekeepers, and we talked about it the last time we spoke. And this idea that we have so much power, and we do, not to um, you know throw that away by any means, but I think this idea that we I've just lost my thought. I will bring it back.
That's okay. I think like when you say like gatekeepers, it's kind of fascinating because there is a I think it's a negative term that has been used in terms of, but it's also our job. Our job is to like look at actors and
Yeah.
see if they're right for the role, if they have the kind of, again, I go back to comedy where it's like if you can't hit the beats right or if you can't make me laugh, you're not going to get the job. Does that mean you're a horrible actor? No, you're just not right for this. And I think that there is so there is some kind of gatekeeping involved. Um and I think that that needs to be acknowledged. But I think prior to, the way things used to be done is that was used as a power of position. And I have been in rooms with casting directors who make it very uncomfortable for actors to come
Yeah.
in, and they use their power against them, and they don't like to be friends with actors. They want to keep that wall there because they see that as like their way of holding, something over them. And I think that needs to be broken down. But I do think it is a respectable career
Yeah.
that we have a talent that, I mean, I've had experiences where I have taken an actress who's never done anything and walked her through the process of getting a show all the way to a series regular, and now she's doing great. And it's like,
Yeah.
and it was all because I pre-read her and I worked with her and we got her to where she needed to be. And again, and she had the talent to work with me on that. And so there's something that, you can't put an actress in a room with anybody and
Yeah.
expect them to come out and be like, oh yeah, that's it.
Hmm.
We do have talent and a lot of, knowledge to give. And
Yeah.
I don't want to like demean that. But the problem I think we're encountering is when you become a high volume casting office, that goes away because realistically, one casting director cannot do 20 projects.
Yeah.
I will say they can't even do 10. I mean, there's not enough time or brain space to do it. I do one and it's like, okay, I do two or three and I'm like, okay, now I'm done. Like I'm stretched
Yeah.
too thin. So what ends up happening is it becomes more of a factory where assistants are casting who have never done anything.
Hmm.
And they're just like, oh, well, I know my boss likes, XYZ actor. I'll bring them in, or
Hmm.
they've only done these big things. So I know they can act. There's no, I mean, casting assistants are there to learn and to like figure out if they have taste and build
Yeah.
their experience. And I think that's being totally pushed aside when you have 20 projects and you're like, okay, I'll bring in the same 20 to 50 people, roll them through.
Yeah. There's
And
no real
it's,
curating
yeah,
happening anymore. There's no
no.
discovery or, reinvention. I think that's the thing that we're losing. And it's a real sad thing to see within the community. And I think the
Hmm.
thing that I sort of lost track in my own excitement earlier was that the sort of gatekeeper aspect of it is I think that because everybody is so focused on that phrase and that word, that
Hmm.
nobody ever cares to sort of pull back the curtain on the casting experience and find the humanity in what we have to go through,
Yeah.
because that is, we are struggling just as anybody else is,
Hmm.
especially in this time where we're on the verge of a writer's strike, and who knows if that'll go 2 months or 6 months, or we just don't
Hmm.
know anything right now. And because of that, there is such a scarcity in opportunities to begin with. And when you look at, if you go on like Casting About or whatever it is, and you look up the casting directors and see how many names or how many projects are associated with one name, it is
Hmm.
illuminating that even in a time when there is so much need from the community, people are still not trying to support each other or support us. And
Yeah.
especially now when all of this drama has been happening,
Hmm.
there are so many casting directors that I've spoken to in the last 3 weeks that are just like, I don't know what I'm doing here anymore. I don't know why
Yeah.
this is not what I signed up for, to be
Yeah.
this like, somebody that people despise. And, we do whatever we can
Hmm.
um, to create opportunities and to
Yeah.
create the version of the industry that we aspire to be part of.
Hmm.
And we just don't have the opportunity now to be part of it based on what's
Yeah.
going on. And it's really
Yeah.
sad, because I know I speak for both of us. We love actors. We want to be
Hmm.
friends with actors. We want to be part of their journeys, and to see them all grow and to see them all succeed and be part of it. But like, this narrative that's being pushed right now is really hard to swallow.
Yeah. And I want to go back because I
Yes.
want to hear you. I'll tell you my experience and I would love to hear yours because I think something that gets lost is, again, more of the humanity, the stories of it all, because we
Yeah.
just get shoved into this box of the same, the big high volume casting directors who don't have individual thoughts or how we like got to where we are because, you've been out on your own a little bit longer than I have. But, I have, I've been out for 5 years. I was with a very long-standing casting director, and I was running an entire show by myself. Like and I'd been with her for 3.5 years, and it was something where I knew I could do it on my own. I think she's a great person, and I think she was following the trend of what casting directors of her world were doing, where they were kind of pushing off a lot of the work on the associate and then to the point though, it's that they don't understand that like if we walk away and you don't support us, it's so detrimental. And so, like, when I walked away after 3.5 years, I'm being really honest. So after 3.5 years, I walked out of her office making $300 a week less
Wow.
than I when I walked in 3 years prior. And she was upset with me for leaving. Like, she was very angry with me. And it was because I was running her projects. I was doing this. And I'm not saying she's not talented. I think she just fell in line with what everybody else was doing, because I know she has good taste in actors. But
Mhm.
she also got to a point in life where she wasn't watching as much new content, and she would only watch screeners that were sent to her. And I was going to showcases, I was going to comedy shows, like, I was kind of building this because that's what we have to do as new casting directors. We don't get the luxury of not putting ourselves out there. So when I decided to leave, it was a huge gamble. I knew, and I remember the very last conversation I had with her before I left, she said, "You don't have the connections to make it." So she's like,
Oh.
"Good luck." And I was like, "Okay." So I like to go against the grain, and I'm like, "Okay, you're telling me not, I'm going to do it even harder."
Yeah.
And honestly, it's one of those things that I'm like, if she would have just been a bit more encouraging and said, "Let me help you. Let me, I don't need 5 projects. If something comes along where, I don't have the time and it doesn't have the budget to pay me my rate." Because I'm not trying to say she shouldn't work. Like,
Yeah.
she should. She's worked
Absolutely.
just as hard to get to where she is. And I'm not
Yeah.
trying to take anything away from that. But it is something where it's like, it's almost this line drawn of like, you did all this work for me and you grew and you helped my business succeed, but now you're going to leave me, so I'm going to cut you off at the knees.
Mm.
And I think that it happens a lot more than we're willing to acknowledge.
Yeah.
But then again, I want to acknowledge like my side of it, where I went out and I hustled. I did every meeting. I went to every network. I went to every production company that would meet with me.
Yeah.
Um, I got an agent, all this stuff. And it was still hard. Like, it's not like you just, I mean, I think actors sometimes think like, oh, you get one indie, you get two indies, you're on your indie
Yeah.
road. Or, it's like, yeah, but I only got paid $5,000. I can't live
Right.
a whole year off of
For
$5,000.
$5,000 for like 3 years of work. Let's be
Yeah,
real.
exactly. Exactly. And it's like,
Yeah.
so we're willing to like put all that effort in and like the financial strain just to try to make it on our own, because we have no support from the older generation. And so
Yeah.
it's like we finally got to a place where we were doing well, and then COVID did hit, and it gave them the opportunity to start taking all the projects and doing all the, kind of
Yeah.
this cycle we were talking about. But I think we have to acknowledge like how much work we had put in prior, because I think sometimes people look at the younger generation of casting directors and say, "Oh, they're just whining," "Oh, they're
Yeah.
just mad because they're not as big as Seraphin, they don't have Marvel." And it's like, no, it's
No.
not that. I'm happy for her, good for her, but why
Yeah.
is she taking a $200, $200,000 micro indie and doing it? It's because
Yeah.
she can throw an assistant on it, get the credit, and win an award for it.
Yeah.
So it's just, so that's, I think I just want to say that part, because I think, and I would love to hear how you kind of started to and felt, going out on your own, because I think, some people can be very supportive. I don't want to take that
Yeah.
away.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think it's few and far between. Like you hear these magical stories of a casting director like passing a project on to somebody else for one of their,
mhm,
I that's how I got onto Willow is or not how I got onto Willow, but like Lauren Evans, from what I understand, Nina Gold passed like recommended her for the job, which is
mhm.
like I feel like in most cases is unheard of.
Yeah.
Which is sad, but it's true. And I think like that's really beautiful when you get to find those instances and to appreciate them for what they are. But it is hard. Like I was very lucky that I started in one office and I stayed there for 6 years, and I got a whole gamut of experience from franchise like tentpole franchise films to cable television pilots, network series, like anything that I could have wanted to do, I had the opportunity to do at that time, which was
Mhm,
such a gift. But it was one of those situations where it's a big office, or it was at the time, and I got to have a lot of hands-on experience because of it. By the end of it, I was running two of my own shows under the umbrella and
mhm.
was making the decisions, and it felt great because it was an opportunity for me to stretch in my casting skins, and
Yeah.
that is such a gift. But it's also you as a co-casting director are representing the other person. So for
Mhm,
me, I never felt 100% that whatever I say goes.
mhm,
And that so
mhm.
that screws around with your confidence a bit when you're in the thick of it. But but I think, you know, it was a gift in some ways, but it is also not sustainable in other ways. And since then I've had the gift of being able to partner with my old boss on a
Hmm.
couple of things, but it is a challenge of being sustainable on your own.
Yeah.
And because nobody's retiring, nobody and everybody's sort of hoarding work in a capacity. And I think even the people who are hoarding work are so not aware that they're part of the problem.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think they have no clue what's happening.
Yeah.
And the sad part is like even again, even through I'm going to bring up the self-tape controversy a little
Yeah.
bit. I mean, again, it all started with Betty May putting out a thing,
Yeah.
Instagram ad saying that they were going to start charging for their self-tape space.
Yeah.
And again, she is one of the biggest working casting directors right now, and I have not heard her apologize once of
Just to
like,
the
"Oh, sorry."
community. Yeah.
Yeah, cuz it's like you don't understand your one action took us all down.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know about you, but like, I mean, I've gotten messages in my Instagram, account of actors being upset by it. And,
Yeah.
again, it's like, well, I'm stuck in this position where I'm already playing from behind because we were just getting our businesses going off the ground before COVID. And now we're already set back a little bit. And now we're even being more set back
You're being
because now people don't
crucified for
trust
it.
casting.
Yeah. And that, like, just to talk about the whole Betty May of it all, like, I don't think there was any malicious intent there. I
No.
think she genuinely thought that she was giving another resource to actors. But I think there's a part of it that maybe she's just not as in touch with the actor's struggle that it
Hmm.
is right now. Like, I'm sure you're the same. We have so many friends who are actors, and
Yeah.
seeing the struggles of constantly looking for representation and people not
Hmm.
delivering on one side and fighting the fight of self tapes and sending things out into the void and not getting feedback. Like, those are all they're all valid frustrations, not to take
Hmm.
away from the actors, but they're pointing their frustrations at the wrong people, the people that are
Yeah.
the middlemen still, you
Yeah.
know. And I think
Yeah.
that is a big part of the conversation that's not. And the people who are speaking up the loudest from the casting community are not the ones that should be the mouthpieces, you know, that
Yeah.
maybe they don't have the experience that they need to be able to say those things with 100% confidence that they have.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it's, you know, just to give context for what we're doing, like, even before the pandemic, I was working, and I think I've mentioned this once before. I was working on The Strain, a
Hmm.
FX series. Guillermo del Toro, Carlton Cuse, two very respected directors and
Yeah.
showrunners. In our casting office, we had an office, but our tape room that was given to us was a hallway with doors on it.
Yeah.
Legitimately, the hallway that was used to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And it was such a small space. We fit in a chair for the actors, our backdrop, a camera, and two of the softbox light sets or whatever that are not supposed to get hot. But every other actor, we would have to shut our lights off, turn the fan on, open the doors, and that would delay us in process because that room would turn into a freaking oven. So
Mhm.
to understand the context and the history of casting and how much we as a profession have been respected or disrespected over the years, like, even though we are one of the most important departments for a film or a television show, we are at the bottom of a totem pole,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know. And so now when all of this is going on and the studios and networks have realized that they don't have to spend amount of dollars on us, that they can cut our budgets even more than they already have because we barely get paid as it is. If
Mhm.
you're, you know, even as a partnership, it's like it's a 2-for-1 deal. It's not two people getting
Yeah.
paid.
Yeah.
And of course they're going to cut it. So the anger should not be towards us. It should be shaking those trees and getting the studios and networks to start paying for space
Mhm.
again.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's my TED talk.
Yeah. I love it. I love it because you're so passionate, and I feel your pain because it's
Yeah.
like and again, I think it all goes back to kind of why we chose to do this podcast of like, let's talk about what happens in casting because it's like, again, it's been this tabooed subject for so long of like, God forbid you say somebody's name, like in a
Yeah.
negative way, but if they're doing something negative, they should be able to withstand us saying something like, hey, you
Yeah.
shouldn't have done that. You should have just come out and apologized. Or, because I do agree, I think a lot of people who are causing the problems right now within casting and the self tape controversy have no idea. and and or are claiming ignorance.
Yeah.
And I think they like to live in ignorance because there have been multiple times in my career where, I've worked for very big offices and assistants couldn't make rent because they didn't know, because their boss who's making, $30,000 a week with all their projects, they don't know that a one bedroom in LA costs $2,000. I actually had an old boss say to me when she's like, "Oh, what does a one bedroom cost these days? $700 a month?" And this was not that long ago. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no. But I
It's just
think
so out
that's
of
like they
touch.
can
Yeah.
claim ignorance if they can, if they don't know. So it's really hard because I feel like we're just kind of like scratching and clawing to try to get
Yeah.
this done because all we want to do at the end of the day is cast and make a decent living. We're not
Yeah.
trying to be millionaires. We're not trying to, and I think there's just, it's kind of snowballing now into something that's very negative. And I would love to
Yeah.
turn that around.
Yeah.
And I
And
think, God.
yeah, I think a big part of that also, and just piggybacking on this, is that I think everybody functions in this industry out of a place of fear and
Mm-hmm.
what will happen if I say X, Y, and Z. And I mean, we saw what would happen with Me Too. Like when
Yeah.
people started calling out this stuff, there was a huge resurgence of power, I feel
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and as important it is to do it with the Me Too aspect of it, like it needs to be something that is happening across the board of people
Mm-hmm.
calling out bad behavior. Because when there is like a blanket statement that is made about all casting directors,
Yeah.
when we all know who the repeat offenders are, or like
Yeah.
making actors feel like crap, like the reason why they're able to get bigger and bigger and bigger is because nobody calls them on their shit.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody tells them or tells anybody what's really going on behind closed doors, what kind of toxic environment. And I really wish when I was coming up that I was braver to say more about it. But I hear
Mm-hmm.
these stories from actors now of, like, especially in the days of workshops, of management companies requiring, if they're going to manage you, you have to pay for workshop classes, and they won't sign you unless they did. So they were adding to this toxic environment because they were contributing to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's more stuff like that people just skate by because nobody's willing to speak up. And I think now more than ever, we need the people on the actor side of things, on the casting side of things, to speak up, because right now, the position that we're in, no one's listening to us as the younger
No.
generation. And as
No.
much as we want to yell and scream from the rooftops and like tell everybody what's really going on, nobody cares what we have to say. But if it's the actors in the room that they
Yeah.
don't feel safe and they don't feel like a place that they can be nurtured, like those are the things that the studios need to hear, that the executives, that the directors need to hear, because those are the things that are that change the environment of the casting process.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. I think that's an amazing point to say because it is something that I feel like constantly gets swept under the rug. Because I do think casting, in my opinion, is because we're the first off, so we get forgotten about. I feel like a lot of blame gets put on budgets where they're like, oh no, we can't pay that. How many times did I ask for my just like standard union rate, and I
Yeah.
was told it's not in the budget. You're just gonna have to take this. And it's like, so we fight as much as I always, every time I meet an actor these days, it's kind of funny because I'm always like, I've never understood your position until I started my own company.
Mm.
Because it's like, I've never, and all those moments of like scratching and clawing to get any kind of like, you know,
Mhm.
job or just get paid a living wage. Like it's insanely hard. And and on top of it, like it's not like we can go out and you know, none of us are delusional enough to think we're going to go out and get like the next big studio film, like, right off the bat. But it's
Mhm.
like when you even have like the little crumbs that are given to you, it's like, you better take this or, whatever.
Yeah, be
And
grateful
it's
for it.
like, yeah. And it is always fear based. It's always
Mhm.
this of like, well, will I never work again? And I will say, I had a wonderful boss. I'm going to call her out, Marsha Ross, who she was my very first boss in LA, and she was a mentor, and I'm still talk to her to this day. She always told me, she was like, the best power we ever have in casting is saying no. She said that's the best thing we can always do, and it has stuck with me for 15 years now. Where
Mhm.
I'm like, anytime I feel uncomfortable, I say no, And it's like, because I think so many other casting directors, always come from that. Oh, I can't say no.
Yeah.
Because if I say no and I get my crew or my team a good wage, they could go to somebody else who's just going to do it for cheaper. And then I've lost that. And it's like, and then I'll never work again. Or I think if we all just kind of supported each other
Yeah.
and was a bit more like, hey, like I honestly, I think those stories, I mean, they're lovely to hear of like so and so passing on a show or whatnot.
Yeah.
It's like if they would just say, you know what, I have 10 projects, but you know what, here's so and so who I saw their movie and they're up and coming and they're really lovely. Like, you
Yeah.
know, it's like we take so much time and effort to learn actors and who's up and coming that no one within casting actually cares who the next generation of casting is.
Yeah.
And again, not to go back to it, but I think that if you leave an office to try to go do your thing, the majority of the time, I'll say like maybe 90%, it's not a great break. And
Yeah.
you're going to come up against that even more so.
Mm-hmm.
You're not getting that support. So I hear you. I hope it changes. I don't know. And I hear it because it sucks because I do feel like we're just screaming into this void of like,
Yeah.
listen to us, listen to us. And then we
Yeah.
have these people coming out just saying the most ridiculous things. And, you know, we have a Facebook group of casting professionals. And I know when a lot of the self-tape stuff was going on, we had people in the group saying, why is nobody speaking up to us? And it's like one little line got released from our CSA that got put into a deadline article and it was weak. And they're like, well, we did our part, done. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, we're the one who are getting attacked daily.
Yeah, but I also I want to call out Deadline too because what they
Yeah.
did was really irresponsible. Like I don't know where integrity in journalism is anymore because that whole break in the article was clickbait. Every single
Mm-hmm.
article that they have released since then is clickbait. The headlines
Yeah.
are ridiculous. They're not talking to the right people. They're not interested in getting the real story. Like
Yeah.
they covered the red carpet on our RDOs. Like let's talk about the truth of it. Anytime that we have a cast announcement come out for
Mm-hmm.
anything, our names are stripped from those announcements
Yep.
by the deadlines of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Deadline specifically, but the other ones too. You know, so like
Yeah.
they don't care about casting directors, about casting until they can put us in a negative light. And
Yeah.
that is the truth of it. And they didn't do any research before they started pushing that narrative that casting directors are out to get actors and coming after that, like targeting them to spend even more money, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Because
So
to be fair,
yeah.
I, you know, like again, not that I'm like hugely known, but like no one's ever reached out to me. Like
Yeah.
it's never been like something where it's like, hey, let's look up the CSA database and see, like, let's go out to every casting director and say, give us a comment. Because right
Yeah.
now they're going out to every actor saying, tell us your experience.
Yeah, sling mud at
Then it's
them. That's
always
great.
painted in a negative light. And
Yeah.
I will say, to be positive, on a positive note, as many negative DMs I've gotten on Instagram, I've gotten a lot of positive ones. A lot of
I
people are
have
like, I'm
too.
so sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think this. You're amazing to read for. I wish, you know, I
Yeah.
can't wait to be back in the room with you, but I totally, you know, everything like that. So,
Yeah.
and to those people, I say thank you so much because I don't think people understand how much that means.
Yeah.
Because the negative ones are just exhausting. And it's like, because while yes, I understand this, that Betty Mate did this and that we have this problem with these hoarding casting offices.
Yeah.
Like I can't, like we can only do what we can.
Yeah.
And until we can actually get studios and networks and directors and producers to listen to us and say, hey, look, like you're an up and coming director and producer. Why can't you take a shot on an up and coming casting director, just like
Yeah.
you give shots to up and coming costumers and production designers, and everyone gets their break at some point. And it's just like, we have bodies of work to show our
Yeah.
work. It's not like we're coming in with nothing. And yet we're just still constantly getting that
Yeah.
pushback. And you know, it's funny is I remember back when I first started my company, because I was always like, I'm going to do things different.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to push these agendas. I'll never, and to this day, not, you know, I have not hired somebody I couldn't pay what their rate was. Because
Mhm.
I said, if that's the case, then I can't take the job. Because if I can't pay my associate what she's worth, I can't take it. And so, but I remember a good friend of mine who's a producer and has hired me a few times and again, it's just one of those producers you just click with that you just
Yeah.
get. And I was like, can I put it in my contract that anytime a press release is done, it says casting by Jennifer Presser? And he flat out told me, he's like, absolutely, I'll put it in your contract, but I cannot control. He's like, the majority of times I put casting directors in my press releases, they cut them out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so what is our, and I was like, I don't know how to go against Deadline and Variety and Hollywood Reporter to be like,
Yeah.
hey, hello, we exist and we are a huge part of our
I'm
film
like, we
making, the
did this
filmmaking
work
process.
that you are announcing.
Yeah.
My favorite thing is when like the lawyers and the agents get honorable mentions and
Yeah.
all of these art. I'm like, I'm sorry. Were they the ones digging through all of the self tapes and all of the in-person auditions that got these people the role? No.
Yeah.
It's just, it's
Yeah.
such a fascinating, and part of it I think is because we are an industry dominated by women, like a field that's
Mm-hmm.
dominated by women, that the pay and the respect that we're given is reflective of that, of how we are
Yeah.
seen.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know what the fix is, and I think we're in this place, and it's really upsetting because because of that, the ratio of how many women are in this field. It's this moment in history that we're all like women helping women, and we want to support it, but I don't find that to be true.
No, I don't think
And it's
that's true
really
at all.
disheartening, and I really wish that, because especially our generation, like we're not ones that sit back and wait for stuff and
No.
are entitled. Like, I worked my ass off the entire time I was with my old boss. I worked my ass
Mm-hmm.
off when I was on my own because it was my own banner. Like, there's no version. I've cast so many short films and so
Yeah.
many student films, and like I've done commercials. I've done everything to like pay my dues and
Mm-hmm.
to show that I deserve to be here.
Yeah.
And it's so disheartening to see how we're still treated, and we
Yeah.
don't for some reason we don't have a right to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very, and again, it's like when you put somebody down so many times, like how many times do you expect us to get back up?
You start
And
to
the
believe
reality
it.
is, the
Yeah.
more people I talk to, they're leaving. And so it's like ultimately you're going to look at if you, they're going to encounter some time at some point that you're going to have this massive gap because again, the people who are doing all the casting right now are not the younger generation, and they will have to go away eventually in one way or another. And it's something that, what happens then? You have no one to fill that gap, because now again, I've talked to probably 5 people who are back in school getting their degree in
Yeah.
something else, moving on to, they've moved out of LA to go pursue, get a job at their family company. And it's like all these people have put in so much effort, and they're good casting directors. And it just sucks
You
because it's
can't
like,
survive.
yeah, you can't live when you have people making millions and millions and millions of dollars. And it just is, it breaks my heart a little bit because I love what we do. And I have found that there's so many wonderful people in casting, and it's just kind of getting snuffed out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm going to fight till my dying day to stick around. But, and again, maybe we're screaming into the ether, but even if like one producer or director listens to this and is like, you know what, I'll fight for my casting director,
Yeah.
I'll fight for this, or, whatever. I see it as a win because the more we can talk about it, because we aren't that older generation who won't just shut up and go to the
Yeah.
corner. I
Yeah.
think we all know what we deserve, and I think it's worth fighting for at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Especially with how much, I mean, not in this moment in time, but typically how much content there is. There's no reason that we all shouldn't be able to not only
Mm-hmm.
survive but flourish right now,
Yeah. It's kind of fun that I want to relate this to is like, I get such a high from like finding a cool talent and then seeing them succeed. Like, I know it doesn't happen overnight. We see it on the flip side of like nurturing these actors that we really believe in.
Yeah.
And I've done it with multiple people that I'm like, oh my gosh, I used to, or, they're famous now, or they're like on this big hit show. And you're like, man, I read you when you were 15 years old and you've just been such a hustler, and like, good for you for keeping at it and keep going. And like, and now they're flourishing. And it's like, there's such a high of being a part of somebody's journey. And like, I think that's a bit lost from our side of it, of like, don't you want to be on the side of watching somebody flourish and create this amazing career and being like, I you know, because again, it's teamwork. Like at the end of the day, no one department can make a film
Yeah.
as much as people maybe want to believe they can. But it's like it's like we are an integral part of it. And it's also like I wish people could understand the high you get from that, because it is really fun to watch, to work with somebody and watch them grow. And again, I've had very established producers take shots on me, and they're like, you know what, you have great lists. I saw this
Yeah.
movie you did and I really like what you did with it. Let's give it a shot. And I've created some amazing relationships that way. And it's like, it's so fun. And I know they get excited when I get recognition for my work. It's not just
Yeah.
that one-sided thing. And so I agree. I think it would be really, I love that what you're doing with IMDb Pro. I think that's amazing. And hopefully it will bring a lot more awareness to a new generation, because I think that's what we need. And I think, again, the more we talk about it and keep
Yeah.
it going, it's, you know, because I think sometimes people are like, oh, it's just casting, they'll go away eventually. Like,
Right.
I'm like, no.
We're not going anywhere.
We're a feisty bunch these days.
Yeah, seriously. And it's good. I think we need that. And I think that allows us to find the next generation of actors, truly.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can all stay around long enough to do that.
We will.
Yes.
So in that vein, tell me, like, I don't know, tell me a story about like an actor that you found and you loved. And
Yes.
is there anybody new, or even that you found off self
Yes.
tapes or something like
So
that?
I'm going to take you further than that. So
Yay.
there was an actor, so setting the stage, when we were working on The Force Awakens,
Hmm.
I went and I did a 3-week open call in the Midwest. We did 7 cities in 3 weeks.
Wow.
I did morning shows to promote it, which is very not good for me. But
Nice.
somebody put me in front of a camera. We did morning shows to promote it. We had these open calls that were like thousands of people. And then I would have like one day of just doing one-on-one auditions. And while I was in these cities, I would go to the universities and I would also do like little speaking engagements and then audition their drama program at the university as well. So I did all of those different things, and I went to UT Austin, and they had a small drama class, and I met this kid who was just like, just his energy was like the most beautiful thing, and he stood out in his class. He had such an exciting, he was just so excited to be there, and he was a
Hmm.
huge Star Wars fan, and so he was asking so many questions, and for whatever reason UT Austin didn't want to have the kids audition. They said that if they want to do it, they'll do it elsewhere. And so anyways, I gave this kid my card and I said, if you end up doing the viral audition, please like send it directly to me. And he did. And he sent it to me, and I mean, he was green because he was a freshman in college, but there was something special about him. You just knew
Yeah.
immediately. And so he was one of the few people that we showed JJ. And JJ was like, yeah, like there's definitely something cool and unique about him, but I don't think it's going to be a fit for the lead. Like, let's try to find him somewhere else in the movie, if to be part of. And
Yeah.
so time passed. I kept saying like, what about Keith? What about Keith? And it didn't end up happening because at a certain point, JJ went to the UK, and then Nina was focusing sort of on her people, and we sort of lost in the shuffle. But he and I stayed in touch over the years. He came out here
Hmm.
as a part of his extension program for UTLA, and we had coffee, and like I said, I sent him out on a bunch of manager and agency meetings, and every single
Hmm.
manager that met him wanted to sign him. Every
Oh,
single one of them. And he's got such an incredible story that like
yeah.
he's just so unique. And he started working with a manager, and then that manager hooked him up with an agent that he liked to work with, and now he's a series regular on Your Honor. Yeah,
Oh,
his name is Keith Machekenyanga.
oh, I love
And he
that.
is so wonderful, and it's been such a joy. And I also got to cast him in something that presumably gave him his SAG card, and
Oh,
so it's been so wonderful watching him grow and like evolve in this industry and figure it out, and if I
Mm-hmm.
can continue to be part of his journey in some capacity, like that's my end game. That's it's
Yeah.
been, I mean, that's what we want with all of our actors that we meet
Yeah.
over time. What about you?
Oh, what's funny is like I've had so many. Like I just, there's, again, not to go back to it, but there's such a high in like
Yeah.
finding good untapped talent.
Yeah.
And like I've even found it in generals where I'm like just sitting with
Oh
somebody
yeah.
and I'm like, you're good.
Who
You're
are
good.
you? Yeah.
Yeah. And it happened once, like one of my very first generals, as like when I started my own company, was with a actor from this side of the pond, and never had seen him in anything. He was coming out in this big series at the time. And I was just like, I don't even like, he's kind of young. And
Yeah.
I was like, I don't think I even need to see you read. Like, I think you're just good. Like, I just think you're good. And, and then his show came out and I saw him
Yeah.
in the show. He was really lovely. And then we were looking for the lead of a music biopic. And he kept popping into my mind. And I was just like, oh, I love this kid so much. I want to see him. So I reached out and I was like, would he tape for it? And he, considering he was on these two big shows at the time, I was like, he probably won't. And he did. And then on top of it, he was like this huge musician and or very talented. And he was like, I've never told anybody I do music because I don't want to be the guy who does music.
Yeah.
He's like, I love acting and that's what I want to do. But he loved who our movie was about. So he's like, I'll do it for this particular one. And again, it's just like, it's so fun. I mean, but then it's, again, like I've had the kids who, I've read since I was 15 years, or they were 15 years old.
Yeah.
And it's like to watch them progress or, and we, I did this stupid movie called American Pie Girls Rules. And it was like a slight remake of American Pie, but with girls in the leads. And, it was kind of a dorky movie, but it was kind of fun because we had the freedom to find untapped talent. We didn't need a name. We didn't
Yeah.
need somebody of value. And we got, again, one girl now is like the lead of the Boys spinoff. And the other girl is like, another one of the girls is doing an HBO Max series. And I'm just like, I knew at the time, they're like, we need something. And then it did
Yeah.
really well on Netflix during COVID. And so it's like, again, if I can just be a moment of like
Yeah.
putting somebody with super talent, even if it's not the best movie, putting somebody on that next level of stage,
Mhm.
it's so exciting to me. And like, and that's where, not to go back into the deep stuff, but like when actors say like, we don't watch their self tapes, I just think it's so untrue. Cause it's like, at least for me, and I can only
Yeah.
speak for myself, cause I know there is probably a problem with some of the bigger offices, but, I have found so many amazing talent off tapes.
Yeah.
And again, I've become friends with some of them. That's the crazy thing is it's like, I have reached out and been like, that was amazing. Like,
Yeah.
and again, I think that's where partly, like, I don't think maybe the older generation of casting directors would ever do that in the past to actually reach out. And I've Instagram DM'd people and been like, hey, I'm the associate or I'm the director on this
Yeah.
project. Like, that was an amazing read. Good job.
Yeah.
And I've become friends with actors who have read for me because then they'll reach out to me on Instagram or shoot me an email and say, hey, thank you so much for bringing me in. Just really love that. No worries if it doesn't go anywhere. It's like,
Yeah.
it's those personal things that it means a lot to me because a lot of times I think we've kind of touched on that where we feel a bit overlooked,
Mhm.
but yet we're giving this huge contribution. We're creating the first visual look of a film or
Yeah.
a TV show. And it's so exciting when an actor acknowledges that. And I think that's why even when they win awards and one person thanks a casting director, our whole industry is like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
we got thanks for something at the Emmys,
Yeah.
something, and it's just like, yeah, I think if more actors understood like the amount of arguing and, I had this one time, this is a great story actually. I was casting a pilot and there was a girl, we had read 200 girls, just couldn't find what we needed. And I
Yeah.
read this girl who I'd never met before, had maybe did one or two things in her career, and she just had the right vibe, as bad
Mhm.
as that sounds. And she was a really solid actress. And so we worked together, we got there, and I remember being so excited. And I showed my boss at the time, and she was like, nah. And I was like, what? And I was like, she's so good. And so I was like, screw it. I'm just going to send it with the other guy. I'm the one doing all of it. So I put her in
Yeah.
the selects
Uh-huh.
and we sent her through. She ended up testing and getting the role. And it was something that was like, that would to me was one of the biggest successes of my internal career,
Yeah.
of being like, you can do this, Jen. Like, you saw that from the pre-read and you worked with her and you got
Yeah.
her to where she needed to be. And I would have given all my entire salary to get her that role, because I was like, I think she deserves
Yeah.
it and she's perfect for it. And it's the first time I felt like my convictions were like real. And I do that so much. And it's like, I think actors sometimes think we only do this for special people or certain things. But
Yeah.
again, I've had an actor, I have a very good friend who's an agent, who was like, I just signed this kid out of NYC, or not NYC,
NYU.
UNC, sorry.
Uh-huh.
And she's like, I know he's not even right for the role, but I want you to read him because he's just special.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. I was like, I'll let him read, but he has to understand coming in, he is not getting the role. Like, he just was not right for it. There was no way. And I already knew we were kind of circling somebody else. And so I said, I just want to be very clear, because I don't want to waste actors' time.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to put them through the ringer.
Yeah.
And he came in and gave such a good audition. I was like, dang, I wish I could give it to you. Like, I wish I could fight for you on this one. But then cut to 2 years later, I got to give him the lead in one of my indies. And I was like, okay, like, it pays off sometimes to do that. I'm not saying do that all the time, but it's, you know.
But so I think that's part of what we do, of like allowing ourselves to be surprised, you know, and going sort of the unexpected route, whether it's in the moment or not. I think those are the things, those are the auditions that we reference during future projects that we're casting, being like, oh, this person didn't get the role, but like, you have to see this audition that they gave me. And that those things go a long way. So this idea that the majority of us do not watch self-tapes or don't watch past the first 20 seconds of it, I think is bullshit. And I will say that as much as I possibly can, because there are so many tapes that like weren't right for the role, but then were right for something else that in the same project. So there's no version of that, of doing this job, where we just shut it off after 30 seconds, 20 seconds, you know?
And you know what's kind of interesting that's happened to me recently is, on one of my films this year, I had like 3 actors reach out to me personally, which I was like, whoa, because they were accusing me of not watching it. And they're like, I didn't get a download message from WeTransfer or whatever it is. And I was like, I don't know, would you want to screenshot? I was like, I downloaded it, it's on my thing. Like, I watched it. And I actually screenshotted it back to them. And I said, look, here's your tape. I watched it.
Yeah.
Like, because I have it on my system. And I was like, I don't know. I think that a little bit of it is like, again, I'm not trying to dog WeTransfer or anything, or like whatever systems are out there. But like, sometimes things can happen, or somebody else could download it, upload it, and then I watch it, you know?
Yeah.
And for them to be like, I didn't get the download notice. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I watched it, and it's not, you know, it's not that I'm not putting you forward for things or doing things. It's that part bothers me a little bit, because I agree. I watch every tape I get. Again, so there are times where you like put on somebody's tape and you're just like, oh no, they're physically or whatever, they're just not right.
Or not ready. That's the other part. They're not ready.
Yeah. And so then you do kind of click forward, but it's not like we're sitting there going click, 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 click. Did my job, check.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what I think it's kind of being made out to be right now in the trades. And that's a bit disappointing, because I do think both you and I have put a lot of effort into knowing who's up and coming. And I was like, the amount of time and money I've put into generals of just getting coffee with people, or, you know,
or
it's
traveling.
like,
I think that's the other thing. Like, anytime I go to a different country, like, I sit down and I have generals with the actors in that area. And so, you know, I think it's this, we tried to immerse ourselves in whatever community we're going into in order to make sure we have our finger on the pulse. So, especially because the world is so small now.
I know.
We're in 2 different countries right now.
I honestly keep telling people in London, I'm like, we're on our way to a global industry. Like, it's happening.
Yeah.
It's going to happen sooner than we realize.
Yeah. Wow. We've made it. We've done it. I think also the fact that we made it through this episode, a full hour of conversation, and hopefully nobody's been offended by our conversation.
And if they have, you can reach out to me personally. I'm happy to go on record with anybody and take them down on this, because it's.
But also, if we've offended you, take inventory as to why we've offended you, because there's a problem at hand here.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you for listening to our second episode, and for listening to our experience, because I think that is part of, of this industry and what we do, whether it's as actors, as casting directors, is to know how to empathize with people. And, especially with what's going on right now, there's a lot of validity in what's being said, but there's a lot of people just not listening to the other side. And so I think that we have to take the headphones off or the silencers off and just open the door and listen to each other, because I think that will help a lot.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that is an amazing way to end the episode. And next week we're gonna have a fun surprise guest. So excited.
Yeah.
So thanks, Jess. It's been fun.
Yeah, now you get ready for bed, and I get ready for the rest of my day.
I know. Love a good 7-hour difference.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will catch you next week, and cheers.
Cheers. Somewhere. Oh, that didn't sound good. And goodbye. If you love listening as much as we love sharing, click subscribe on our YouTube channel or find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thanks for listening.